It is time for another best of 5 series in StarCraft 2, and what I got for you today is a professional Zerg versus Protoss. Spawning here in game number 1 on Mech Depot LE in the bottom left hand corner of the map, playing with the red drones, we've got none other than the Zerg, known by the nickname of Elazer. And his opponent, spawning in the cross position, playing with the yellow probes, he goes by the nickname of Neeb. Now Neeb, as of me making this video right now, is the top ranked Protoss on the planet. This guy is an absolute beast. He's of course from the United States, and while there are definitely some amazing Korean Protoss players as well, such as for example of course Stats, like Hero, like SOS, those guys are absolutely incredible. Neeb is most definitely amongst their level as well. He's an absolute force to be reckoned with, and like I said, I mean statistics don't usually lie, right? Statistically speaking, this guy is the top level Protoss on the planet as it is right now. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that he's up against a weak player whatsoever. As a matter of fact, both of these players, both Neeb and Elazer, participated in the so-called WCS circuit, which is part of the World Championship Series in StarCraft 2. And the finals, of course, will be played at BlizzCon here in just a couple of weeks, which I'm actually really looking forward to. We'll have to crown a new world champion at that point. But regardless, for the WCS circuit, which both of these players, once again, right, they both participated in these series, there were 4 premier events across the globe. So there was WCS Austin, there was one in Jönköping, then there was one in Valencia, as well as one in Montreal. And those are essentially the highest level tournaments outside of Korea that only happened 4 times during the year. Now, interestingly enough, Elazer ended up winning one of those tournaments. If I'm not mistaken, he ended up winning WCS Valencia, right? And that's a very, very tough feat and a very important tournament to win. However, Neeb, the Protoss player, he ended up winning the remaining 3. This guy right here is an absolute force to be reckoned with. Without a shadow of a doubt right now, the top level, non-Korean Protoss on the planet, and definitely the top level non-Korean at this point as well. Of course, outside of Korea, it's a little bit trickier to say, or rather inside of Korea, it's a little bit trickier to say who is the best player, because they do usually only participate in a handful of tournaments over there as well, and oftentimes they don't necessarily play against the non-Koreans nearly as often, so it's really hard to call who is like the top of the line player right now. But regardless, Neeb is an absolute monster. He ended up winning, like I said, I believe Austin, then Jönköping, as well as Montreal just very recently. This guy is an absolute beast. Now, we're going to be watching them in a best of 5 series, and so far everything is looking very standard. Zerg going for that 3rd base, and indeed we do see the Protoss player deciding his tech of choice right here at this point in the game. Now, judging here by the setup, would not be surprised if he would go for either Adepts, but more than likely a robotics facility here very shortly. And I actually think we're going to witness that right now, and then potentially also Archon drops. This is something very standard in the Zerg versus Protoss matchup, but the nice thing is that we're going to be watching these players duke it out in a best of 5 series, and whenever you're watching StarCraft 2, a best of 1 is all fine and dandy, right? And both of these players, if they were forced to play a best of 1, would most definitely play a straight up macro game, because that is where their strengths lie. But if you have to win a best of 5, and you gotta play the same game every single match, of course you're gonna be extremely predictable, so you're essentially forced to mix it up at the very least every now and then. So I love casting and watching best of 5s, just because players are of course going to be forced to just mix it up at the very least, you know, every once in a while, right? Both of these guys are great at macro. They're all very strong in the early, mid to late game. They can't really be faulted, and by the way, we do indeed see that Dark Shrine go down. So very shortly, this game will be starting up as well. 4 gateways should be down in total here for the Protoss player, so indeed, we are going to be seeing a little bit of aggression right here with that Archon drop, and potentially some Dark Templar here as well. Now, Elazer did decide to go for the Pneumatized Carapace. We'll be able to get that vision right there of not only the robotics facility, but now also that Dark Shrine, so he knows precisely what is going on at this point in the game, and if it wasn't already enough, the gas timings right here in that natural expansion for the Protoss player will most definitely tell the story as well. It's very exciting, though, to see how these players are going to match, in particular at BlizzCon, right? It's really just a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of weeks away at this point. I'm really looking forward to that, because, you know, Neeb is, he's incredible, like I said, right? And I'm really excited to see him duke it out against the top-of-the-line Korean players on the planet as well. See how he can fare against them. Because every single time they've played, it wasn't either for, like, a super important tournament, or, you know, it was just not that great of a series to watch. And this, well, you know, that's not entirely fair to say, I suppose. But either way, like, everyone at the BlizzCon final finals wants to become the world champion, right? Then no one's gonna, you know, not play their A game. So it should be very cool to see exactly how they are matching against each other. And Neeb, as it is right now, the guy's an absolute monster. Like, he's playing extremely well. Now, apparently, he's deciding to just simply warp in the Dark Templar inside of the main base. Of course, lair timing was done here. That does mean that Neeb will shortly get scouted here, but not without at the very least being able to take out a couple of workers, it looks like. He will be forced to pick up, however, 2 drones going down there in total. Apparently, well, this is actually starting to get a little bit low in HP, but apparently it's not that big of a deal. And Neeb playing it super aggressive here, decides to leave. Oh man, that's just barely out of vision right there for that Overlord, but he decides to just leave the Warp Prism inside of that main base. Hydra then is going down here for Elazer, so it does look like he's transitioning towards that very standard Hydra mid-game. But this is something that we haven't seen a whole lot. A bunch of Zealots get warped in with this fight as well, and while he delayed that third Nexus for just a little bit, there's currently not a whole lot out here to try and defend against this, because all of these units are very good against the Zealots, of course. Or rather, all of these units are going to be very good against the Zerglings, of course. But so far, the defense have been very, very smooth for the Zerg player. Interestingly enough, right there, we did see a little bit of, leapfrogging there to the low ground. As it is right now, though, Zerg only has got 52 workers, which is not usually what the Zerg player is looking for, but he's already started producing 10 Hydralisk. And this could actually just simply be a super aggressive play to try and finish off the game a little bit earlier, realizing that that third base is going to be delayed, and therefore, of course, the economy for the Protoss will be slightly weaker as well than you would normally expect it at this point in the match. Now, of course, that micro, that juggling right here of the Archons has to be on point. Beautiful play so far by the Protoss player, but is he really capable of dealing any damage here? While the Zealots did get forced back to Ire here for the time being, Neeb is gonna, he's just gonna be able to escape with that Warp Prism intact, and more importantly, the 2 Archons in it as well. Third base is right now done, and Neeb is sitting on a very comfortable 60 plus workers already, whereas the Zerg is currently still only hanging out at 50. That is not quite the economy that you're looking for here as the Zerg player, and it may very well be that Elazer slightly misread the situation that he was in. He's gonna have to try and do as much damage here as he can, because he is currently gonna have to play catch up. Now, there is a single Overlord here that is apparently morphed into a Dropper Lord as well, so that one is going to be capable of, at the very least, moving some units across the map. I wonder what the plan with that one is. So far, though, we just see continued unit production here for Elazer, and I think he must realize as well that the Zerg player, or rather the Zerg economy is going to be slightly behind here compared to that of the Protoss player. Zerg is just simply trying to keep track here as well of exactly where that Protoss army is located. We do see that very popular army composition based around the Archons, the Immortals, and then of course some Adepts, and eventually some High Templar as well. The Zealots, of course, do go very nicely with that too. Elazer, however, right now moving an Overlord full of units to the other side of the map, and while he is currently very far behind when it comes to economy, it does look like he's shortening the attack paths here to potentially try and go for a big push here very, very shortly. Here's the Overlord, though. The Overlord is going to drop some of these units off into that main mineral line. This is actually a brilliant timing here, because at this point, the Protoss player is currently moving across the map. There's actually nothing being able to here to warp this army back towards the main base. Neeb completely caught with his pants down, not realizing that apparently the majority of his army was walking across the map, or at the very least, he did not assume that he would meet the Zerg there. And in a very uncharacteristic kind of move there, Elazer cleans up that entire force, and with that, I mean, that is essentially immediately game over. And rather than just simply playing it out and trying to squeeze every single last drop out of this game, Neeb decides to tap out and realize that he needs to win 3 more. Very interesting game number 1 right there in this series. Now, it's quite interesting. I get a lot of comments from people saying, like, how am I ever gonna get as good as these pro gamers, right? And my go-to answer has always been just simply practice very hard, right? If you want to become one of the best, you gotta make sure that you practice as much as the best players do as well. But interestingly enough, even when you play this game a ton, most of the professional games just simply come down to who makes the first mistake. Of course, there are strategic insights as well as to what strategy is better, and every now and then we see build order advantages on certain maps in particular, and of course, there's gonna be a slight case of imbalance every now and then as well, where strategies just turn out to be, just a little bit more powerful than they were originally intended to be. But regardless, like, essentially, that last game, Neeb didn't really make very many mistakes. He played it absolutely brilliantly, but then he moved across the map, was preoccupied defending that Zerg drop in the main base. He ended up losing a bunch of his army because instead of bringing the mothership core with his main force, he was forced to morph it over towards that main base, or move it over rather towards that main base, used the photon overcharge, and all of a sudden he found himself with all of his army gone in the middle of the map because he was not capable of mass recalling it. And that's essentially just a minor mistake that is just the decision making of the positioning of that mothership core, and all of a sudden the game ends. Right? StarCraft 2 is very unforgiving when it comes to those kinds of moments, and even at the top level, like we are watching right here, it is still coming down to a lot of games where, you know, it's just the first professional gamer who's making a mistake. And guess what? How are you gonna make less mistakes? Playing the game a heck of a lot. It's one of the reasons why a lot of the Koreans are usually regarded as some of the best in video games. In particular in Korea, it seems like almost like a cultural thing where working hard is very much so rewarded and very much so expected as well. I've had a couple of conversations with Korean, you know, just Korean citizens and also like pro gamers and whatnot, and apparently long hours every single week, not like the, you know, the 36 or whatever average we have over here in the Netherlands, that is the standard over here. Apparently work weeks can go far, far longer than that, and you know, just simply practicing hard and working hard, of course, is gonna pay off as well. If you practice 14-hour days over the course of a couple of years, of course you're gonna become a far better player than if you were to practice only, and I say only, say like 6 hours every single day. Anyway, of course, there's a point of diminishing returns as well, and you know, we can discuss that at a later time, but it is quite fascinating to think about at the very least every now and then. Anyway, I don't even know how I got to that subject. I talk about video games a lot. I sometimes find myself talking about subjects and then I try and rethink my thought process right there, and how I ended up there, I've got no clue. Anyway, regardless though. Oh right, we were talking about making mistakes. There we go. I found the way I got there. Anyway, we do see a bit of a change up of strategy right here. So Neeb, he very much so favors those Twilight Council based openers as well as Archon drops, but this is probably his go-to and his bread and butter in the vast majority of the games. He goes for a lot of Oracle openers. And Oracle openers, even though Zerg players are great at countering them right now, and usually Terran players, or rather Protoss players, are not really expecting to do a whole lot of damage. Is he going to commit to that? He is. Interesting. Even though they're not usually expecting a whole lot of damage to come out, oftentimes they are mostly just looking to keep the Oracle alive, do a little bit of scouting, slow the Zerg down a little bit, and there you go. Cheeky little move there, keeping that Oracle on the ramp for a little while longer, and he was just simply allowed to pick up a single worker kill that way. Anyway, we do see that Oracle come out right now, and it's actually very important for Protoss players to keep that one alive. The Revelation skill, one of the abilities on the Oracle, is very important in the later game as well. Whereas for the longest time, Protoss players were just sort of going for the damage output. Zerg players got way better at it, and eventually Protoss players stopped using the Oracle opener altogether. All of a sudden, people decided, hey, what if we keep the Oracle alive rather than like suiciding it into a mineral line, and we can use the Revelation skill to keep track of where the Zerg's army is located later on into the game. And if you keep it alive for a very long time, you can get value from like, you know, the 3.5 minute mark or so where the first Oracle comes out until the very last second of the game. Third Nexus going down very early on into this match. There's really not a whole lot to be seen just yet though. No Mothership Core even out at the Protoss side of the map just yet. Rather greedy play here for Neeb. Just look at this, right? This is something that you mostly do in a best of 5 series. I mean, he goes for a very greedy double Oracle opener and then doesn't build the Mothership Core until the third Nexus is already, you know, set up and planted. This is something that you only can really do in best of 3 series, just because normally people will indeed just start making a bunch of Zerglings and send them across the map. But knowing very well what Elazer's playstyle would be, and knowing very well that Elazer is currently 1-0 ahead, he has to cut a couple of corners at the very least here and there. Now, he's even going to be sending all of these adepts across the map, it looks like. Almost wanted to commit there to the shade forward, but really he's just buying himself a ton of time. I don't think he really wants to be dealing all too much damage here. Or, you know, if he's allowed to, of course he will try and commit to it. But I think he's mostly just trying to force the Zerg player to not be making drones, which is essentially damage on its own as well, right? All of these Zerglings that just got made, they're not going to be drones, and that means that the Zerg economy is going to be slowed down, even if it's just a tiny little bit. Lair being morphed in right now, we see that Baneling's Nest going up as well as that +1 melee upgrade. And this game is looking like it's going to be much more of a late game focused army. And indeed, Neeb, he is showing what he wants to do in this game, and he is adding on 2 additional Stargates. The most common strat is probably to go ahead and build those robotics units as well as the Archons, but very quickly, this Overlord will scout out something very, very important. Here's what Neeb's plan is. He's trying to build up the massive capital ships known as the carriers. And while apparently some of the drones are under attack, this scout right here is crucial. If this was not spotted here by Elazer, he would not be able to respond in time. And essentially, there are a couple of options right now that he can go for. Of course, he could go for a Hydra push. He could go for Queens as well. He can try and tack up towards Vipers. But he most importantly knows right now that he's going to be fully capable of making a whole lot of drones. And this is crucial because he needs to build up that economy. Gold base does not get cancelled there in the nick of time. Apparently, the single Void Ray did end up picking up the kill. These oracles are still zapping across the map. And this is what I mean, though. Like, he's keeping track of exactly what the Zerg player is doing. We see a bunch of Spore Crawlers go down. We see that Infestation Pit going up as well. So Elazer looks like he may be planning to tech up towards a Hive here in just a little bit. But he really needs to try and see if he can potentially get himself a 4th base up. Because that's going to be crucial if he plans on fighting this very powerful Protoss-based army. Interestingly enough, this is cool. I did not expect this whatsoever. Hold up. I thought this was going to be the carrier play that we have seen so many times. Then I looked at the production tab, assuming that we were going to see a fleet beacon. But he's actually building up a ton of oracles. This is something that I've seen him do a whole bunch as of late as well. It's actually surprisingly powerful. It looks like Elazer was like 4 steps ahead of me because he was already adding on those additional Spore Crawlers. But here we go. He's going to try and zap down all of these Queens. Now, energy was saved up for transfuses. And so far, it looks like the Zerg player is doing a pretty decent job at keeping the majority of his mineral lines alive. And that was a very cheeky little move. Of course, these oracles are going to be able to deal huge amounts of damage if they were not scouted in time. But great move there by Elazer, reading precisely what was going on. I didn't quite understand why he was already, you know, adding on those Spore Crawlers in the main base, but this makes so much more sense right now. Going for the Hydras, going for the Queens, and then even going for the Infestors as well to try and hit that Fungal. What a perfect play. I thought that Neeb was looking to go up to maybe, you know, the much more common mass carrier playstyle that is so very hard to stop, but this is more or less like a transition from that, right? That was really cool. That was a great scout by Elazer, though. Figuring out precisely what was going on and not confusing it for something that it wasn't. Whew, very nice play. Now, a lot of gateways are being added on here, creating a bit of a semi-wall-off. Of course, making it much more difficult as well for any of these banelings to be able to roll into that mineral line. But I wonder what the exact style and endgame plan here for the Protoss is going to be. I mean, he's still adding on 3 oracles at once. He's adding on a ton of gateways, though. Adding on a forge as well, so he's planning to upgrade them for a little bit more, but he is most definitely not going to be able to tech up to a very important army supply, or like a very powerful army count here, because of course gateway units, they fall off quite rapidly, and I actually do like this move as well here from Elazer, going very quickly for that lurker then, and that means of course that while of course the Hydras are going to be a necessity in countering all of these oracles, if he manages to like kill the oracles and then, you know, morph them all of the lurkers, he's going to be capable of just killing all of this base. Now there are so many of these units out there. Look at this. This is going to be a little bit wild. I mean, there's no way that this 4th base will live. The damage output of these units is absolutely ludicrous, and once again, that 4th base gets denied. I wonder if it would be a good move here for the Zerg player to potentially go for like a Spire as well. Of course, the Spire does allow him to start producing... oh, here we go. He's going for the Fungal. He's going for the Fungal. Gets the hit off as well. Very important one there. Of course, Fungal does not last a super long amount of time, but he's going to be able to pick up quite a few of them. There we go. Forced to use the majority of his energy. But rather, what I was going to say there, I wonder if it's going to be worth for him to maybe get a Spire and create a couple of... you know, even like Mutalisks would be pretty good here because they're pretty fast. But I was more or less thinking about Corruptors just because these units, of course, would have got great air-to-ground attacks. They cannot quite hit air-to-air. A lot of these stasis wards going down, and I actually really love this creative style here from the Zerg, or from the Protoss player. This is something very new school, something that we have seen a little bit of in the past, in particular from players like, for example, Haas, but this seems really strong and very, very powerful indeed. Zealots, though, are currently moving across the map, and I think that Elazer essentially, or initially, under anticipated for this push. I mean, he did send some of his units back, but Zealots are very good nowadays. They do a lot of damage, but more importantly, they're buying time. Because right now, I mean, are you going to commit with the Queens or are you not, right? There are a couple of Lurkers here, a couple of Infestors as well, accumulating more and more energy. But there's just so many Stasis Wards here, and they will all need to get triggered. Once again, though, now that the majority of the Zerg army is on the other side of the map, it looks like the Protoss was thinking about at the very least moving into that, you know, 4th base location once again. But looks like he has decided here for the time being to go ahead and accumulate a little bit more energy. Question is, though, is there going to be enough here for the Protoss player to defend against this, right? Because while there are a lot of Zealots, there are also a lot of, like, very powerful Zerg units, right? We know the strength of Lurkers, in particular against units like the Zealot, and with some great fungal growths as well as transfuses, I think there's a lot of options here that can potentially severely hurt this Zerg player's army. Here we go, fungal growths once again being activated, going straight after all of those oracles. Zealots trying to move in right now as well. Transfuses, however, going down on those queens, doing a heck of a lot of work, and it looks like somehow, some way, the Zerg player manages to live there with a lot of his army intact, getting so many of these very tech-heavy and expensive Protoss units. But still, is there enough left over to close this one out right now? There's only a single cannon defending this 4th, or I guess the 5th base location of the Protoss. Such a massive army, though, but Zealots are just being warped in right now with so many excess minerals here for the Protoss player. I mean, Zealots are going to be great at killing the majority of this army, but at this point, the Zerg is so very well upgraded. But here we are at a bit of a funny moment, right? We got that central part of the map controlled. The Zerg, of course, is going to be able to take control of that for a little while longer. However, he doesn't have a whole lot of anti-air anymore, and there are 5 oracles at production right now. Every single second that goes by, it's going to be very tricky to see how the Zerg is going to try and close this one out, because if he oversteps his boundaries for just a split second, every single one of these units does end up falling. Now, the Mothership Core also gets sniped, not before putting up a time warp, though, which is going to make it tough for all of these Hydras to try and get on out of there. Once again, a fungal growth gets activated, but I don't know if there's going to be enough Zerg here left over. Beautiful engagement by Neeb, cleaning up the majority of this army. Charge will slowly come off cooldown once again, and that means that indeed Neeb is going to be able to pick up game number 2. What an awesome way to play. That was really, really cool. You know, my favorite part about that last game is that even though I play this game a lot, right? I think I'm currently right around like rank 250 or rank 300 or so in Europe. We're pretty high up on the ladder. And even though I had like full vision of the production tab, as well as all of the buildings and units and structures on the map, Elazer looked at the Stargate timings of that previous game twice, and he immediately realized that it was going to be Mass Oracle, whereas I looked at it and I assumed that it was going to be the standard carrier play instead. Such a cool way of playing. I mean, that definitely shows that Elazer, even though he did not have all of those, you know, I guess production tab cheats that I've got right here in the top left corner of the screen, he is still the far better player than me. Just he looked at that twice and he immediately knew exactly what was going on. And of course, eventually he did end up losing the game to the Protoss player right here in the bottom right corner. I mean, Elazer just simply overstaying his welcome for just a little bit. I mean, Neeb playing that out very smartly. I love the way that he didn't like only use the oracles to deal damage, but he also used them to buy a lot of time, right? Because while that was all going on, he quickly expanded to up to 5 bases there, which is an insane amount. And of course, you know, no matter how strong your army is going to be, if the Protoss players get 5 base economy behind it, he's going to be capable of just remaxing very quickly once again. And, you know, Neeb played that out brilliantly. It's kind of cool, though, to see that, like, development over time as well from, he actually took the Zerg, or he actually took the 3rd base right here on the low ground. This has become a little bit more popular as of late. But anyway, it's kind of cool to see the Oracle go from a unit that initially was only really used in proxies. You know, you would, for example, build the Stargate over here and then, you know, try and zap away at all of the drones in your opponent's mineral line as early as you can. Whereas at some point it just got countered so easily by Zerg players that Protoss players stopped using them for a while. Then we had the Revelation skill, you know, that of course turned out to be very powerful. And now all of a sudden we see these kinds of builds popping up every now and then as well, where the Protoss players just gonna continue making, you know, a lot of these oracles as well, and Zerg is just still a little bit uncertain of exactly what to do. It's such a cool thing, because the Oracle was kind of considered to be a pointless unit for a little while. And I think right now it is the gold standard in the Zerg versus Protoss matchup. And really, all of the Protoss matchups as it is right now, with maybe the exception of Protoss versus Protoss. Anyway, so Zerg actually decides to mix it up here. I mean, we see that quick Zerging speed, we did see that slower expansion timing, and we see the Roach Warren go down right now as well. Elazer, he's gonna rush across the map here with a lot of Zerglings, but more importantly, a couple of Ravagers as well. And this is an extremely powerful build, in particular on a map like this, because if you manage to get into the main base of the Protoss here, you can do a lot of damage, and the Protoss has a lot of area here to wall off. This is gonna be a tricky one to scout as well for the Protoss. Now, he's desperately gonna try and do so, of course, realizing that he blocked the timing of that natural for a little while, but right now, this is an important timing here. Neeb confirms that there is no third base up. And while, of course, he will try and counter this probe, the amount of Zerglings that are out on the map right now as well should be a clear giveaway that something cheesy is going on. And Neeb actually, brilliant move there, right? Like, it's not even that exciting, but he made the mothership core about a good minute and a half earlier than he did in the previous game. And he probably could have decided to not go ahead and do so, but just by judging the setup there from the Zerg, he immediately knew that he needed that faster, opposed to that third base. And that means that he's gonna have an extra photon overcharge available. Now, that does mean, of course, that he's gonna have an easier time defending, but he is most definitely not out of the waters just yet. There's gonna be a lot of Zerglings here. There's gonna be a bunch of roaches as well. He's gonna be capable of running across the map, Elazer that is, with not only roaches, but also potentially Ravagers, and they can do a lot of work. At the same time, though, we do see that Overlord Cocoon once again morphing in, so it does look like Elazer is at the very least planning to drop a couple of Zerglings off into that main base of the Protoss. And at this point, I mean, Neeb fully realizes what's going on. He wanted to get that wall off, does get it there in the nick of time. Mothership Core so far deciding not to use the photon overcharge just yet. I think he's waiting for the, you know, more pristine opportunity there. Actually, making that sentry come out on the other side of that ramp, very interesting decision. I'm not entirely sure why he decided to do so. At the same time, though, two adepts there are going to be able to stop this from, you know, at the very least dealing all the damage that it's looking for right now. Going for the corrosive biles, though, and right after that pylon as well, that does mean that Elazer will be able to slow down the Protoss here for quite a while and really forcing the Protoss player here to split up its photon overcharges. Very smart move there by Elazer. The normal version of this build does not hit at two locations at once, and I actually really like this inclusion of that Dropper Lord a lot, because not only are you going to be able to do a lot of damage with some great micro, you can potentially do a lot of work here as well. A lot of probes, however, have already started up falling, but you do have to keep in mind that this is going to be essentially an all-in here by the Zerg player. He needs to make sure that he closes out the game here, and Neeb's defense has just been a little bit too good, and Neeb ends up obtaining the victory here in game number 3. I have to say, though, I like the way that both of these players are already mixing it up in this series, right? You can see that they play a lot. You can see that there are a bunch of mind games going on as well. I mean, the most critical part of that last game was the timing of Neeb's mothership core, which may sound very silly, but just having that, you know, little bit of additional energy on the mothership core makes a huge difference, because one additional photon overcharge kills like what, like 4 or 5 roaches if it needs to? I mean, of course, Elazer's micro is going to be a little bit too good for, you know, that many kills. But still, like, it's a huge defensive measure there. And Neeb he's been mixing it up the entire series here already in just very minor ways that do change up the outcome. We may have just assumed that Elazer was going to go for something a little bit cheeky, like, for example, that build. And maybe he's done it like that on the ladder a whole lot as well before they started playing the series. Who knows, right? There's a lot of things going on here outside of the game as well. A lot of mind games, so to say, where they know about each other a lot. They play against each other a lot as well, of course. If you know, play in tournaments at all, you'll recognize that or you watch tournaments at all, rather, you'll recognize that both of these players do face off and play against each other quite regularly in tournament settings as well. So that does most definitely mean that they keep in mind the previous series that they've played, and of course, they want to make sure that they obtain the victory as often as they possibly can. But it does mean that sometimes you have to cut a corner knowing where your opponent's strengths and weaknesses are. For example, you see this quite a lot, in particular from like really defensive Protoss players. The Zerg players are just gonna, you know, they're just gonna look at that and they know, like, hey, you're not really gonna get aggressive early game anyway. I'm just gonna go straight up to 80 workers, and good luck at dealing with that, right? Rather than like playing defensive and getting a couple of Zerglings and roaches here and there, going for the defensive sport crawlers. If you know that a Protoss player isn't gonna attack, you just simply tech up to 80 workers, and you're gonna be able to roll over any Protoss player that allows you to get to that point. But of course, a lot of Protoss players are just simply not gonna allow you to get there. But if you know that your opponent will, it's gonna make the game significantly easier. Once again, though, very quick expansion here from the Protoss player. Nothing all too cheesy out on the map just yet. They're simply constructing that second pylon inside of that main base. Very, very normal. And he's going directly into the Adept here as well, and then the Warp Gates as well. So shortly, we should be able to see the tech of choice here from the Protoss player in yellow. In the meantime, on the other side of the map, we see the exact same setup here as well here for Elazer. Once again, leaving those 3 drones into the gas geyser. So that means not only is he going to be able to get that Zergling speed out, but shortly also the Nematized Scarab Base upgrade for those Overlords. So he will be able to start getting that Overlord speed just out in the nick of time to be able to scout out exactly what it is the Protoss players got planned for the middle part of the game. And also shortly after, indeed, he pulls 1 drone out of the gas geyser. So he's still going to be able to obtain enough gas here to start up the +1 melee upgrade. Mothership Core once again out at an earlier timing here. Neeb does not want to take any unnecessary risks. Not going for that crazy Stargate play just yet. It looks like he's actually planning to take a 3-minute third base. Right? And while globally speaking, like, this game looks very similar to the other ones that we've seen him play as well. This is insane. Like, he's going for a 3-minute and 10-second third base. And while that's pretty common for a Zerg player to do, so far, Zerg has not really shown that he's gonna, you know, want to be aggressive against this. And judging here by the setup as well, Elazer currently really has no clue about this. He's gonna be able to scout out very shortly, indeed, what kind of tech is going up for the Protoss player. But by the time he recognizes that, indeed, it's going to be a super quick third base, that pylon right there will already be enough to ward off any kind of Zergling pressure. And it does indeed look like Neeb should be alright here in the earlier part of this game. And it does mean that Neeb will be able to bring in a huge amount of resources here very shortly. Now, at the same time, right, there's a couple of options here that Elazer has. Of course, you could go ahead and just simply, you know, build up a massive army and try and go kill the Protoss right now. It's a chance that could potentially work out, or an option that could potentially work out, but the chance of it are probably rather slim, just because of the strength of Neeb's defensive play. Another option right here for Elazer is, like we discussed earlier, he could just build up straight up to 80 workers and make whatever army composition he likes. Right? And this is the moment in the game where he recognizes as well, like, hey, the Protoss player, I mean, the guy's been playing very aggressive in his series so far, going for some sort of, you know, pressure every single game. At this point, it looks like he's going to be, you know, allowing me to drone up as greedily as I would like to. And already now we see the Protoss player, you know, falling behind in that worker count. Elazer, though, not quite done scouting just yet. He's continuously checking out if there's anything important here that he needs to know about. And seeing these couple of gateways is going to be rather important for him. We do see that robotics facility now also chroning and boosting out this warp gate upgrade. That does mean, of course, that Elazer will have to face off against a bunch of Immortals and Sentries here. One of the most classic compositions for the Zerg versus Protoss matchup. But I wonder really what Neeb is going to follow this up with, right? Because not only is he building up this huge economy, he knows that at this point it's going to be nearly impossible to stop the Zerg player from going up to their designated worker count, right? Is the Protoss really going to, you know, be able to deal any pressure right now to the Zerg? I highly doubt it. So that means that, you know, he may move out here, but he will probably be forced to mass recall at some point. And this is more than likely just going to be a tiny little move to potentially slow down the Zerg's economy. But for the most part, he's going to go up against a big economy here from the Zerg player. Adept still holding that front door, so that means that the Zerglings will be forced straight towards that third base, or at the very least, they're gonna check it out, see if anything fishy is going on there. But right when the Protoss army moves out across the map, right, a handful of Zerglings now move into that third base location as well. And actually, a pylon now gets forced as well for Neeb in that natural expansion. And, you know, this army here, while it looks pretty nice, is not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage. There's going to be plenty of Zerg here to be able to deal with this. And actually, I really like this small little attack squad, though, from Elazer, making the most out of this. And, I mean, he could potentially deal some damage, but there's, like, no Warp Prism here, right? There's no Warp Prism. Now, once more, we do see this transition, once again, here from Neeb. This time around, it could still be that Mass Oracle play, and judging by the first game, I think that it may very well be something along those lines. Right? Because once again, we see triple Stargate going down, but of course it could be the Mass Carrier style as well, though he's chrono boosting out once again a couple of Oracles. He's planning to go for that Mass Oracle style once more. I really do like this. Now, the Mothership Core, of course, is the saving grace of this army. He cannot lose that Mothership Core. Using those force fields there in the nick of time to prevent the Queens from closing in, but he is going to be forced to get those Protoss units out of there, because still, a lot of probes ended up falling here throughout this entire... Oh, actually, wow! That's kind of wild as well, right? Considering there was like a handful of Zerglings nibbling away over here and then a bunch in the mineral line over there. I thought that, you know, close to like 10 workers ended up falling there, but no, only 4 probes died there. That's kind of wild, actually. Very solid defense from Neeb, even though he didn't really seem to have any units. Now, once again, we will see this this Mass Oracle style, and the question is, will Elazer adjust to this, right? And I like this a lot. I like this a lot. Recognizing what's going on, he hasn't quite spotted the Stargate just yet, but he knows roughly the playstyle that the Protoss is going to go for in this game. He's trying to slow down the Protoss' economy instead of, you know, the other way around. Normally, we see the Protoss trying to slow down the Zerg, but this time around, we are indeed going to see a big amount of drops here inside of that main base of the Protoss player. And while initially here, it won't do all too much damage, it also did get the scouting information off, and this will allow Elazer to prepare with Hydras just a little bit more in advance. At the same time, we do see an Overlord now making its way towards that mineral line as well. It's loaded up with Banelings, and so far the Stalkers are letting it go through. This could actually be a huge amount of damage right here. Elazer dropping off the Banelings into that mineral line of the Protoss player. Not really getting... Well, he's got a whole bunch of worker kills, of course. It's not going to be terrible just yet, but he's going to try to actually move 2 more into the main base as well. What a cheeky little move there. Getting so much more value, forcing the warp in the natural, knowing that the gateways are going to be on cooldown. He just simply decided to drop off 2 there in the main as well, and I like this adjustment a lot. Even though, you know, Elazer recognized what was going on, right, in game number 2 as well, he still ended up taking a little bit too much damage from the initial batch of oracles. This time around, he's allowed to make that big clump of Hydralisk, and more importantly, he's given a lot of time as well. Right? And right now, it seems like rather than Neeb, you know, being in charge of this game, it all of a sudden looks like the Zerg player is going to be the one that's allowed to push. Very different than what we saw in game number 2, even though the setup has been very similar once again, though. Banelings are going to try and make their way into the mineral line, but this time around, only 2 probes end up dying. Still, this is a very defensive posture, and Protoss is, he's going to go up against a maxed out Zerg force here very, very shortly. There we go, 195 supply. Very menacing army for sure. There are going to be quite a couple of these stasis wards available. Still halting this progress here of the Zerg player a little while longer, but I think that even like half of this army in stasis is not really going to make a big difference, because most definitely that 4th base will end up falling. Great move there by the Zerg player, advancing onwards once again. Now, we have seen, you know, Neeb pull off some miraculous defenses in this series already, doing it extremely nicely there in that last game as well, of course, on the underwater map. Getting a lot of value out of his army there, but I wonder how he's going to be able to pull something like that off in a game like this, right? There are going to be cannons there, of course, photon overcharges as well, warpins with more and more zealots as well as a whole lot of, you know, a whole lot of these oracles, but still, there's just simply so many Hydralisk. Getting those Banelings in there as well is really smart, because that means that the zealots cannot quite charge on top of all of these Hydralisk, and while he's going to be capable of picking up a couple of these units here from a distance, and while apparently the probes are also forced to move off of the line, I wonder if there's going to be enough Protoss to prevent this Zerg from killing him right now. And it actually does look like there's going to be just barely enough Protoss. I mean, 17 probes ended up dying there, but in exchange for the entirety of that Zerg army. I mean, rather than losing the game, he decided to pull the workers there, use them as living shields. Here they are, the real MVPs of this match so far. But still, is there going to not just simply be too many reinforcing Zerg units here as well? Once again, this is going to be scary. A lot of these Protoss units end up getting surrounded. The Zerglings are dealing a heck of a lot of damage as well. Of course, they are, you know, they're right now upgraded to +2 attack, which is a very scary amount. It's actually the Hydralisk at this point that are not upgraded. And Zerg on top of that has got an economy that you do have to be terrified of if you are a Protoss player at this point in the game. 70+ workers going up to that 5th base here too, using it primarily as a, you know, transfer kind of base at this point as well. And once again, Zerg is going to be able to max out in just a matter of seconds, even producing a Nidus network right now too. He's going to be capable of using that to his advantage to potentially bring the queens into the engagement as well if he likes to. But at this point, once again, Zerglings are moving their way, or making their way rather, across the map. A lot of Hydras are also going to be joining in this party, and Elazer evens up the score once again, bringing us to the grand finals of this series. I always love it whenever players are very evenly matched, right? Every now and then it's fun to watch someone stomp the other player as well, but generally speaking, it's these kind of games and these kinds of series that make me very excited about StarCraft 2. I mean, you can see that these guys are very evenly matched in skill level. They know precisely what's going on. I wonder exactly who's going to end up taking this series, because honestly, either of them can easily take it, right? I mean, both of them have been trying to pull rabbits out of a hat here for a while already, but I'm ready for like a long, drawn-out macro game. I'm okay if this game gets to a point where every single base is taken and all of the resources are mined out. I mean, that doesn't happen very often, but I guess I can dream, right? Anyway, apparently Elazer, did he just average up to like 700+ APM? Sure, go ahead. I guess he's really busy selecting all of these workers, okay? I mean, I guess that, I wonder if that's like a show of like nerfs as well. I wonder if that ever happens, right? I wonder if there's like any statistics that someone has done on that. But I can imagine if you would do a survey on like players' APM throughout this series, I wonder if players, you know, if they get a little bit more nervous if their APMs go up as well, because usually you do start tapping those keys just a little bit more aggressively than you may absolutely need to. Now, Neeb actually tried to be a bit of a bother here, blocking that drone from building the hatchery on the low ground. That means that Elazer was indeed going to be forced to take the third base, but just simply by judging the timing there, he already knows roughly where the Protoss player has spawned, so he knew where to take the third base. But honestly, it can be rather annoying when you're on a map like this, where, you know, you basically decide on where to take your third base by your opponent's spawn location as well, if the probe comes to your, or if the probe comes to your side of the map this early on. But Elazer figuring out precisely what he needs to do, and he will be able to, you know, spot exactly where that Protoss player is going to be located here early on into the match. Neeb once again going for that quick second gas geyser in the main base. So far, nothing crazy just yet, and I would be quite surprised if either of these players are going to try and, you know, play anything wild in this game. Of course, in particular, right, in the final game of a best-of-5 series, a cheese may be extremely unexpected. I mean, essentially, this has now been reduced to a best-of-1, right? And usually in a best-of-1, you want to try and show your A game, but, you know, a cheesy strategy can still easily work out, although I would be very surprised to really see anything along those lines from either of these players. Elazer going to simply for that quick expansion here, and while he's forced to produce these queens a little bit further away from each other, he can just simply take the third here on the low ground and spread the creep to connect these bases, and in a couple of minutes, it will look like this third base wasn't taken as the first expansion anymore here whatsoever. Neeb going for the Twilight Council in this game. Not having a mothership core out just yet, so, you know, he obviously realizes the timing here of that spawning pool, and he knows that he doesn't need to be as careful. Interestingly enough, though, and this always is a huge point of vulnerability for a Protoss player, the pylon is part of the wall here, right? And if you're going to skip out the mothership core as well as put a pylon there, I think you're going to have to build up some buildings right behind it, so you cannot get bailing busted early on into this match. We'll see if that's going to be an option here as well. Now, of course, Neeb for the longest time was very well known for his adept play. There indeed, we do see the chrono boost there on the adept attack speed upgrade, which is a very important one. So, you know, even though he knows that it's going to get scouted, because once again, I mean, Elazer is not going to mix up his Neotize Carapace timing. Even though he knows that it's going to get scouted, he apparently still feels confident enough to potentially do a little bit of damage here. Interesting move. I wonder what exactly he assumes to achieve with this, because Zerg players have gotten very good at countering this kind of play. The funny part is that Zerg players for the longest time tried going roaches, and while roaches are still very viable against adepts as well, I feel like really the gold standard has indeed become the Baneling. It's just so very good at cleaning this up. And here we go. Elazer will figure out precisely what's going on in this game here. Judging, of course, by the robotics facility timing as well, he knows when he should expect the Warp Prism to be flying across the map. And that means that so far, Elazer apparently is feeling comfortable enough to continue onwards with the drones for a little while longer. Now, he does go for the Baneling Nest right away, as well as that +1 attack upgrade on those Zerglings here shortly in that Evolution Chamber 2. And already, he's actually starting to produce a lot of Zerglings, producing them rather early on. Going only up to 40 workers, of course, going for a massive amount of adepts like this does mean that that there's not going to be a third base up here for the Protoss quite as early, but Zerg will have to try and slam this attack back. If he manages to do so, he's going to be in a pretty good position, but if once again, if these units start shading in between bases, this could become very quickly a world of hurt. Now here we go, Shade is going to try and go to that third base location. Adepts are of course going to move up that ramp. I highly doubt that he's going to commit to this, although he can, and there indeed we do see the committal. Apparently a lot of these Zerglings though are going to immediately end up falling. Great decision making right there by Neeb, forcing a lot of these drones off the line as well, picking up a couple of kills here and there, and once again, he's going to be able to make his way towards that natural expansion, and this is going to hurt very quickly, because now we do see that Warp Prism flying very shortly here across the map, and it does look like maybe these adepts are going to be forced to safety here for a little while longer. Already 8 worker kills went down, and that's going to bank the advantage in resources here very shortly, right? Because right now it's 40 workers for the Zerg versus 45 for the Protoss, and while that doesn't sound very significant, it only adds up with this next bit of aggression as well. Warp Prism is here. We now also actually did see that, what is it called right there? The Templar Archives going down, and instead of going actually for a third base, 4 more gateways are added on here for the Protoss player instead. So Neeb is planning to close this out with only adepts at this point in the game, as well as, of course, a couple of these Archons. Archons great at soaking any Banelings, as well as Zerglings, and of course, they're very microable once again. However, there are now banelings here loaded up into these overlords as well. So if they manage to get the hits in on top of all of these adepts, they can still end up killing the adepts here in just a matter of seconds. Here we go. Banelings are gonna try and unload on top of all of these units. They end up doing a whole lot of damage there. Great Warp Prism micro door by Neeb, picking up a lot of these weakened units there in the nick of time, picking up the Archon as well, and once again, so many of these units end up dying. Banelings are unloading, but it doesn't, it doesn't mean a whole lot, right? Even if you manage to clean this up as a Zerg player at this point, once again, I think that's about 18 workers there in total that end up dying. That is a very significant amount, and while, apparently Neeb is trying to be a border here on the other side of the planet as well, and the other side of the planet being the third base of the Zerg. Slowly but surely, he's obtaining that advantage that he's looking for, right? And he could just go back right now. He doesn't need to continue onwards with his aggression. Zerglings are now forced across the map as well, and sort of like a desperation move. I mean, what exactly is he going to be able to achieve with those right now? I really don't see what he could potentially be doing. And once again, we see double Archons dropping off into the main base. They're going to try and drop Banelings on top of Archons. I mean, they can take a lot of those hits, although apparently this time around it got loaded up with Queens instead. Of course, this is going to be an Elazer game that we're watching. It's not gonna be these units. Now the Zerglings somehow, some way, apparently they looped themselves up in that spawning pool before leaving it, because somehow they slipped past that adept on the low ground. Although, even though the new warp in that main base will prevent the majority of these probes from finding their fates right now. And at this point, Neeb is everywhere, trying to do so much damage, shading all over the map, forcing, this engagement to happen here as well. And while the Warp Prism did get scouted there, or did get sniped as well, once again, so many workers are just dying here. So many drones are falling, and Neeb is showing what he's known for. He's showing for his insane control and multitasking. He's sitting proud here on that third base location, warping in more and more of these High Templar as well. And good luck breaking this if you are the Zerg player. What a great move. And while this may look easy, right? If you are a Zerg player and you're looking at this and you're thinking, wow, that's disgusting, Protoss should not be allowed to do this, I urge you to go ahead and try out this kind of shading about with the oracles, or rather with the adepts, as well as all of the archons. It's very difficult to micro against. It's not an easy decision to make whatsoever, and in particular when you are playing a best of 5 series and you're trying to show a different strategy every game. I want you to urge and give this a try and see exactly what's gonna go down. Now we do see the wow, all right, the Queens are gonna try and drop behind the mineral line here. Interestingly enough, of course, they're gonna be able to transfuse that Overlord once again, and while he's gonna be able to do a little bit of damage, I think the Photon Overcharge alone is gonna be more than enough. At the same time, the Adepts here are still on the other side of the map, positioning in this very awkward nuke here that the Zerg player cannot quite surround all of these Adepts from. And I think with the shaded into the natural, I wonder if that is all she wrote for Elazer. I mean, Elazer desperately trying to hold on here, doing some cutesy little moves, making this easier. Oh my god, was that a feedback on a Queen? That is an unnecessary and almost mean thing to do at that point in the game. And indeed, Neeb obtains the victory in this series, playing a hyper-aggressive game number 5 and closing this game out in fashion. I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, you know what to do. Make sure you subscribe so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. Other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.